Hello guys, today is April 28th, 2:15 on a Monday. Let's continue our A Christmas Carol book reading series. Let's go. The children drank the toast after her. It was the first of their proceedings, which had no hardness. Tiny Tim drank it last of all, but he didn't care twopence for it. Scrooge was the ogre of the family. The mention of his name cast a dark shadow on the party, which was not dispelled for full 5 minutes. After it had passed away, they were 10 minutes merrier than before, from the mere relief of Scrooge the Baleful being done with. Bob Cratchit told them how he had a situation in his eye for Master Peter, which would bring in, if obtained, full 5 and 6 pence weekly. The two young Cratchits laughed tremendously at the idea of Peter's being a man of business, and Peter himself looked thoughtfully at the fire from between his collars, as if he were deliberating what particular investments he should favor when he came into the receipt of that bewildering income. As if he were deliberating what particular investments he should favor when he came into the receipt of that bewildering of that bewildering income, to the receipt of that receipt of the receipt of the receipt of that bewildering income. Martha, who was a poor apprentice of a millionaire's, then told them what kind of work she had to do, and how many hours she worked at a stretch, and how she meant to lie abed tomorrow morning for a good long rest, tomorrow being a holiday she passed at home. Also how she had seen a countess and a lord some days before, and how the lord was much about as tall as Peter, at which Peter pulled up his collars so high that you couldn't have seen his head if you had been there. All this time the chestnuts and the jug went round and round, and by they had a song about a lost child traveling in the snow, and Tiny Tim, who had a plaintive little voice, and sang it very well indeed. There was nothing there was nothing of high mark in this. They were not a handsome family. They were not well dressed. Their shoes were far from being waterproof. Their clothes were scanty, and Peter might have known, and very likely did, the inside of pawnbrokers. The inside of pawnbrokers. But they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. And when they faded, and looked happier yet in the bright sprinklings of the Spirit's torch at parting, Scrooge had his eye upon them, especially on Time Tim until the last. By this time it was getting dark, and snowing pretty heavily, and as Scrooge and the Spirit went along the streets, the brightness of the roaring, fires in the roaring, roaring, of the roaring fires in the kitchens, parlors, and all sorts of rooms was wonderful. Here, the flickering of the blaze showed preparations for a cozy dinner, with hot plates baking true and true before the fire, and deep red curtains, ready to be drawn to shut out cold and darkness. There all the children of the house were running out to the snow to meet their married sisters, brothers, cousins, uncles, aunts, and be the first to greet them. Here again were shadows on the window blind of guests assembling, and there a group of handsome girls, all hooded and fur booted, and chattering at once, tripped lightly off to some near neighbor's house, where, woe upon the single man who saw them enter, artful riches. Well they knew it, in a glow. But if had if you had judged but if you had judged from the numbers of people on their way to friendly gatherings, you might have thought that no one was at home to give them welcome when they got there, instead of every house expecting company, and piling up its fires half chimney high. Blessings on it, how the ghosts exuded, how each bared its breath of rest, and opened its capacious palm, and floated on, outpouring with a generous hand its bright and harmless mirth on everything within its reach. The very lamplighter who ran on before, dotting the dusky street with specks of light, and who was dressed to spend evening somewhere, laughed out loudly as the spirit passed, though little king the lamplighter that he had any company but Christmas. And now, without a word of warning from the ghost, they stood upon a bleak and desert moor, where monstrous masses of rude stone were cast about, and as though it were the burial place of giants, and water spread itself wheresoever it listed, or would have done so, but for the frost had held it prisoner, and nothing grew but moss and furze, and coarse rank grass, thou in the west the setting sun had left a streak of fiery red, which glared upon the desolation for an instant, like a sullen eye, and frowning lower and lower yet, was lost in the thick gloom of darkest night. "What place is this?" asked Scrooge. "A place where miners live, who labor in the bowels of the earth," returned the spirit. "But they know me. See, see." A light shone from the window of a hut, and swiftly they advanced towards it. Passing through the wall of mud and stone, they found a cheerful company assembled round a glowing fire, an old man and woman, with their children and their children's children, and another generation beyond that, all decked out gaily in their holiday attire. The old man, in a voice that seldom rose above the howling of the wind upon the barren waste, was singing then a Christmas song. It had been a very old song when he was a boy, and from time to time they all joined in the chorus. So surely as they raised their voices, the old man got quite blithe out and loud, and so surely as they stopped, his vigor sank again. The spirit did not tarry here, but bade Scrooge hold his brow, and passing on above the moor sped whither, not to see, to see. The Scrooge's horror, looking back, he saw the last of the land, a frightful range of rocks behind them, and his ears were deafened by the thundering of water, as it rolled and roared, and raged upon the dreadful caverns as it had worn, and fiercely tried to undermine the earth. Built upon a dismal reef of sunken rocks, some league or some from shore, on which the waters chafed and dashed, the wild ear through. There stood a solitary lighthouse. Great heaps of seaweed clung it to its base, and storm birds, brought for the wind, one might suppose, as seaweed of the water, rose and fell about it, like the waves they skimmed. But even here, two men who watched the light had made a fire, that through the loophole in the thick stone wall shed out a ray of brightness on the awful sea. Joining their horny hands over the rough table at which they sat, they wished each other Merry Christmas in their can of grog, and one of them, the elder, too, with his face all damaged and scared with hard weather, as the figurehead of the old ship might be, he struck up a sturdy song that was like a gale in itself. Yeah, that's how I will finish this episode. Yeah, I read it, but I don't really understand it. I understood that he went to another place after watching Tiny Tim's Christmas, Poor Christmas. Now he's in another place in the depths of the earth, where I was not able to read and understand what I was reading simultaneously, and that's something that I must practice. That's why I'm doing this kind of videos, and we're gonna continue the goals of the Christmas present in the next episode of the Christmas Carol book reading series. See you then.